Good afternoon, this is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding, here to discuss the basics of Internal Revenue Code Section 6038, which is a very common code section involving international reporting. What needs to be done, what do you do if you've been hit with a penalty, how can you avoid, abate, or remove them. So typically Internal Revenue Code Section 6038 will involve international information reporting. For example, it may require foreign corporation reporting, certain foreign assets like FATCA under 6038D, and as a result, it then requires certain international forms to be filed. So you've got the code section. The code section then leads the IRS to creating certain forms in order to comply with the code section. And with 6038, there's also 6039, which is for like foreign gifts, Form 3520, 6039F specifically. But for 6038, you've got the 5471, the 8865, and the 8938 are some of your common culprits right there. What happens if you fail to report these forms to the Internal Revenue Service? Well, one of a few different things may happen. If you're lucky, then you may just get a soft, well, if you're lucky, nothing will happen, right? But if you're kind of sort of lucky, then you'll get a soft letter. These are very common with FATCA Form 8938, where there's hundreds of thousands of foreign financial institutions scattered across the globe that report U.S. account holder information to the IRS. The IRS sees that something should have been filed. They look at your tax return, see that you didn't file it, and you just receive a notice or a letter saying, hey, foreign financial institution A says that you have this information. It's not the same on your tax return, or it's missing from your tax return, and if this is accurate, then you should fix it. This isn't an audit, and no penalties are issued at this time. Otherwise, taxpayer may get an audit notice saying that they want more information about certain assets and income associated with those assets, and the taxpayer has to go through the examination process, typically respond to an IDR, which is information document request, and go through that whole situation. Otherwise, when you have international information reporting penalties, they're typically referred to as assessable penalties. And what that means is the IRS can issue the penalties without auditing you, without there being any notice of deficiency, because they're not tax related to begin with. Let's say someone has a 6038D FATCA requirement to report foreign assets, and the person doesn't file it. Then they may receive a penalty notice, a CP15 notice saying, hey, you're being penalized this much because you didn't report these assets. And the taxpayer is like, well, that's absurd. I didn't receive any notice of the penalty. I didn't receive any audit. I don't understand what's going on. And the idea is with an assessable penalty, the IRS can assess those penalties without there being any notice beforehand. Why? Because there's no tax deficiency. There's no tax necessarily associated with these forms. It brings me to another point. In order to comply with 6038, there doesn't have to be any tax return necessarily filed. For example, taxpayer may have foreign corporation, and that foreign corporation may qualify the taxpayer to have to file a Form 5471, let's say, reporting a foreign corporation. Just because the taxpayer didn't receive any income from that corporation, or taxpayer may not even have to file a tax return, maybe they're below the threshold, that doesn't absolve them or eliminate the requirement that the taxpayer still has to comply with 6038 and still needs to file the forms. So what does taxpayer do if they are non-compliant for Internal Revenue Code Section 6038? Well, there's various options. If they have not been penalized yet, and for example, just learned about the non-compliance, they went to a new CPA, they were out to dinner, and the bad news hit them there. One of their buddies from the same country is like, hey, have you been doing these forms? And taxpayer is like, what are you talking about? Then they can normally do one of the amnesty programs, which I'll get to in a moment. That's preemptive to avoid penalties. If you're audited, then the idea is to prepare facts and circumstances sufficient in order to take your position that you had reasonable cause for the non-compliance. If you're audited because of these issues, normally there's other issues at play. There could be unreported income. A common situation would be someone's a business consultant, they have their own company, they've got accounts and assets overseas, and it's all one big kind of smorgasbord of things that the IRS is going after. If the taxpayer's already been penalized, CP15 notice, then there's various procedures. You normally do a protest letter. If that's rejected, you may want to do an appeal. That may impact your ability to do a collection due process. Depending on those all fair and how much time it takes, you may also consider going to tax court and or possibly going to federal court, depending on the facts and circumstances and how far you want to take it. What we focus on at my firm is non-compliance in prior years before the penalty has been issued or after the penalty has been issued, right? So if it's international related and you have not been penalized yet, then one of the best routes you can go is through one of the offshore amnesty programs, and there's different programs depending on your facts and circumstances. If you're willful or can't certify under penalty of perjury that you're non-willful, you would do VDP, the Traditional Voluntary Disclosure Program. Otherwise, if you're non-willful, you may consider one of the other opportunities, and there's more of those if you're non-willful. There's the streamlined domestic offshore procedures, streamlined foreign offshore procedures, delinquency procedures, and reasonable cause. We have lots of free information available on our main website and our sub-websites. You can always reach out and schedule a reduced fee initial consultation if it's appropriate to something we do here. Again, my name is Sean Golding with Golding & Golding. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.